Everybody. It's now Zoom workshop number 24. So we're getting up there. Tonight is Orla Yudalit of Tevet, which is the night of the 14th of Tevet. So we're really in the middle of the month right now. And of course, we're still in Tafshin Pei Hey as our year, which comes out now to 2025 on the Roman calendar. What we want to do tonight, I didn't really prepare a lot of new material. You can see your actual worksheet is just, not full, which I think is good, because that way I don't feel like I have to cover so much. But what we want to be able to do, but there's a lot of stuff in those 3 short paragraphs. But before we really get there, we want to finish up what we started to talk about last week. Remember, so if you want to get out your sheet, if you still have it from last week, which is our nice big chart where we're filling out all the different connections between the 4 fundamental building blocks of Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Afar, and the different aspects of the soul. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but we got to the point last week where we covered the 4 major bad midot that are associated with the 4 fundamental building blocks, also your 4 aspects of your soul, and these four biles, these 4 fluids, these 4 humors that embitter our lives because of the ease at which we fall into these bad midot that emerge from them. And so, quick review on those bad traits. At the top of the game, there we have arrogance, which is really intimately associated with anger. Remember that, and that's associated with Aish, with fire. And there was 3 different toledot or derivatives that came from that. One was hakpadnut, being makpid against people, not holding grudges, being unforgiving, being unrelenting, strict on other people. The next one was being domineering and always wanting to have kavod for yourself, being in charge, being in control, being the big cheese. And the third one, which was as a result of all that, also that leads to hatred of others, sin'ah, especially other people who really are greater than you or than me, and therefore you, instead of recognizing that people are better or greater, you tend to hate those people. That collection of bad traits comes from arrogance and is associated also with anger. The one below that, associated with ruach, air, breath, is of course using our breath, using our air, the power of speech for the wrong purposes. And there we had 4 subcategories. One was chanufa, or flattery. One is sheker, falsehood. One is lashon hara, which doesn't really need much of a definition. I think we're all very well aware of that. And the last one was hitparut, or boasting. And that was that collection of using speech in a vain way. Then we went down to the level of water, or mayim, and we saw that's associated with lust, the desire for pleasure, physical pleasures. And there was 2 subcategories or derivatives. One was chemdanut, or greed, and the other one was kina, or jealousy. And the last one on the bottom of the pile was the bad midah that emanates from afar, from dirt, from earth, which is depression, laziness, and not just laziness in general, but laziness when it comes to matters of Kedusha. Remember, laziness when it comes to Torah, when it comes to limud Torah, when it comes to doing mitzvot, and so on. That's where we had come to last time. So before we move into the good traits, I'll pause if there is any questions, just to kind of recap. Everybody gets back into the saddle. Anything anybody wants to bring up? Okay, one way that we can do this is if you put your little, I'm not sure how that works. There's something where you get to put your finger down and it's like a thumb or a hand up. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe we could try that and see if I can actually see it on my little camera here. All right, now we go to the good traits. So in last week's notes, at the very end, we have what Chaim Vital writes in Sha'arei Kedushah on the four good traits. And that's really what we, people want to say, oh yeah, great, tell me all the bad stuff. Now tell me the good stuff. We'll tell the good stuff. So we're going to start at the top. We're going to start Keneged Eish, and we're going to work our way down to Afar, which is the one Keneged Earth. So let's see what he says. He says, first of all, the media, this is totally obvious, actually. The media, which is counter to arrogance, is humility. That would make perfectly good sense. Let's see what he says. Anava, shehi tachlit hashiflut. This is a very important point. Not just the fact that anava or humility is the media that we're interested in, but he brings up another subtle point, which is very important. And that is that anava is actually the goal of shiflut. You hear people talk about these two things, anava and shiflut, humility, and I call it lowliness. And the question is, they're not the same thing, not at all. Shiflut is an attribute where you really see other people as being greater than you. You really see yourself on the bottom of the pile, and you view yourself with like lowly. You see yourself as being lowly. That's called shiflut. And when you really see that other people are better than you, that they're greater than you, that they're more important that that than you, and so on, that's an aspect called shiflut. The purpose of shiflut is that it would lead you to humility. What is humility? Humility is really doing things for other people. Now,
It's
if you don't
self.
have a what?
So it's like self-deprecation.
No, which one?
Shifut.
No. You know, there's no aspect of self-deprecation at all. You just realize that you feel about yourself that Joe over here and Yaakov over there, or Leah over there, they're just better people than I am. I have way more sins than they do, and I'm such a much more despicable sinner than them. But it's not self-deprecation. You just hold other people in higher esteem than you hold yourself, because you see all their good qualities, and that's all we should see. We should focus only on others' good qualities, whereas you see all the crud in your own life. I don't like the idea of self-deprecation. I think that has a negativity to it that I'm not really comfortable with. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it just kind of rubs me a certain direction that I don't like. So shiflut, or a feeling of your own lower level, is something that leads to anava. Now, Rabbi Nachman talks about it in 4 stages, 4 levels of shiflut. He says that, if I can remember correctly now, one is you see obviously Gedolim as being greater than you, right? You're not trying to exalt yourself over Gedolim, chas v'shalom. Then there's a level of where you see your peers as being greater than you. So, for example, let's say that you learn with a chavrusa, and he is your peer. He's not a teacher, he's not a student. So you're actually learning with an actual chaver, and yet you see him greater than you. That's all. You're not self-deprecating yourself. You just realizing, you're imagining, you're picturing, you realize the person is greater than I am, even though he's my chaver. Then there's a level below that of shiflut, which is even katanim, even children who are younger than you and smaller than you and not as experienced than you and don't have all that stuff that you went through in life. You realize, wow, they're greater than I am too, and that's in some respects not so difficult to comprehend, because it's easy sometimes to see a child who exhibits such amazing character traits. They're very humble and they're easily to be taught, right? And they don't show a lot of arrogance, so on and so on and so on. Especially when they're very, very young and tender, like say between the age of 2 and 3 and 4. They're very, very dependent, and they don't think of themselves as being anything big deal. So again, shiflut is to realize, wow, that little child is much greater than I am. And then there's a 4th level, which is actually seeing a rasha. This is the most difficult level, obviously, and realizing that rasha is actually greater than I am. That's one way that 4th level is explained. The other way that the 4th level is explained is that something even yourself, you have to realize that even yourself, you're actually lower than you think you are. So anyway, that's a whole separate discussion, but that's all aspects of shiflut. Okay. Now, shiflut is supposed to get us to the meter of humility. What's humility? As I said before, humility is the willingness, and not just the willingness, the actual going ahead with that willingness in practice to do things for people. Because if you don't really feel that people are greater than you or better than you in whatever aspect, because you can define somebody as being better than you in like one area. Not a problem. You can say, wow, that person is better than I am in respect to, and then fill in the blank. All of a sudden, you've now placed yourself at a lower level. That's an aspect of shiflut, and that's good. So the whole purpose of it is to go out and do things for people, to serve people. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the most humble of all. But what did he do? He always laid his life on the line. He didn't care for himself at all. He was always Moser Nefesh. And even when the Torah was given, and the Shechinah came down, and all the elders got together, and he was out. He was like serving. I think that's what it was, right? With Yitro. No, that was when Yitro came, and Yitro joined the camp, and there was a big celebration because they got together. All of a sudden, it was like, what do you see Moshe Rabbeinu doing? You see, Moshe Rabbeinu was actually serving. He was the quote guest of honor along with Yitro, and he was there pouring water and taking plates back and forth. That's the aspect of humility, and we see all that also at the very end of the second Megillah. If you read the Psukim after Shabbos, you also see it that it talks about Hashem, that where you see Hashem's greatness, you see His humility, and then it brings down cases where all of a sudden you see Hashem doing things. He takes care of the orphan. He takes care of the people who are persecuted. He takes care of the widow. He takes care of the ger, gives them food and clothing. He's doing things. That's humility. Humility is action, and it's preceded by shiflut, which is a sense of seeing you versus other people. Okay. Hopefully, I did a reasonable job of explaining the difference between those two. Let's continue on now with what Reb Vital says, and that same first line. Umitrachek mikol minei kas haba al lidei gaiva. So that's obviously related because we said that. Well, first I'll translate it. It means to separate, distance yourself as far away as possible from all kinds of anger, right? That comes by way of arrogance. So really, you can write now in that good trait box, you could say humility or anava. And anava is the goal or the purpose of having shiflut. What is humility? It's serving other people, doing things for other people. And another aspect of that is also distancing yourself as much as possible from anger. And sometimes that just means that if you know that there's going to be certain things that are going to trigger you, that's a big word in our world today, right? Being triggered. It's actually it's not just a leftist or a lefty, like a leftist ideology that I got triggered. It really does happen. People really get triggered by certain events, certain people, and certain things that are said, and certain actions that people do toward them. And if you know that that's going to happen on a regular basis with certain people, then stay away. That's what he's saying. Get away from situations and from any kind of situation that you probably would fall into anger. You have to attack all this from all different multiple directions. And that's the good trait of anava. Okay, let's go to the second one. The next one, what did he say? Is keneged vain speech, is shtika, is silence. Don't talk. Don't talk. Let's see what he says. Vashtika ke'elam lo yiftach piv, like somebody who's mute, he can't even open his mouth. Right? That's being silent. Except levad be'esek Torah or mitzvot. So obviously he can speak when he's learning Torah. To learn to speak when you're doing a mitzvah, if need be, that's all proper good use of speech. Oh, behechricho lekima guf. If there are things that you need in order to maintain your physical body, to keep it alive, then obviously speech related to that is obviously appropriate and it's fine. Ulitzur kavod habriot, meaning that if there are things that you need to say to give people honor and respect, then obviously you would want to be able to do that. Words of encouragement to other people, that's also certainly proper use of speech. But all that kinds of speech, just silence it. No more of that kind of stuff. That's very difficult for some people. Understandable. It's not so pashut. It's very difficult, especially with social media. Everybody wants to jump in and say all kinds of stuff and words of shtus all the time. It's a real bad problem across the board. We're all guilty of it, right? But one way to help the vain speech, which is again flattery, falsehood, lashon hara, and boasting, is just stop talking. Now, except when you have to. One way that you can start to help yourself in this area, just a little bit of an eitzah, is that we're now in the weeks of Shovavim Tat. And so, depending on how you want to count it, it's either 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending if you add the last two, which is Truma and Tetzaveh. Anyway, what many people do is they pick one of those days in each week, 1 day a week, and they do a Tani Tzibor, which is exactly what this kind of ends up amounting to, that you do a fast of speaking. You really work on yourself for that 1 day. You can still eat food. That's what you want to do. Or you can combine an actual fast with a fast of Dibor, right? And so what you can do there is you can say, look, I'm from whatever, 5:30 in the morning, let's say from Alot HaShachar, maybe from Nate, probably from Alot HaShachar. You from that point on till, let's say, Shkia, or whenever you daven Mariv, you will say, I'm going to really work on not saying anything today, unless it's for the need of my body, to give people kavod or to respect, or to encourage people, or words of Torah, or anything that's for the purpose of a mitzvah. You do that 1 day a week. Wow, that's not so pashut. But it's a good exercise, and it would help you to develop this trait of shtika. All right, so that's keneged vain speech, and that's also keneged the fundamental force of ruach. All right, now number 3, which is keneged water, which is obviously lust for pleasure on the bad side. What is on the good side? Listen to this: vamius bechol ta'anugei aguf, to be repulsed, to be disgusted by all kinds of pleasures of the physical pleasures of the body. Now, what do you mean to be disgusted by it? That's what he says. Literally, just be repulsed by the pleasures of the body. Mutarav ha-mukrachim. And even those things that are like normally necessarily allowed, even those things to push them aside and to be kind of disgusted by them. That's not at all simple. I don't need to go into that to tell you how that's not simple. But again, if we don't know what the goal is, then how are we ever going to achieve it? So obviously, even for example, obviously, if water, which is on the bad side, which is, what is it? It's the bile. It's the white bile, right? It's the bile called lavana, the white one. That's what embitters our life, because we become a slave to our physical pleasures. We become a slave to sensations. Like Ari just said, he stopped drinking coffee. So one of the things is, I remember one big Rav, I heard a story about this, where one Tama was telling this Rav, I just can't daven, in the morning without drinking my cup of coffee. And so you know what the Rav said to him? He says, well, now you dafka got to find a way you have to stop drinking coffee. Like, you would have thought maybe the Rav would have said, okay, fine, for you can drink coffee because you can't daven otherwise. But no, just the opposite. Because you can't function properly without it. That's dafka the reason why you have to break that. Because that's enslavement, and that's what all addictions are. I'm not saying that I'm not addicted. I love my morning coffee, although I usually have it much early in the morning. But still, it's be very difficult to be able to sort of break that now and say, I'm not going to ever drink coffee, and after chatzot all the way till after finishing davening. That would be very difficult. Very difficult. And that's nothing. That's like nothing.
Rabbi
So
Nachman actually.
People have lust for food. People have lust for niyuf, and even that's niyuf in a bad way, but even tashmish in a good way. People, meaning with your spouse, people still can have a lust for that, and that's not good at all. And so, literally, to break all those lusts require a tremendous amount of effort, for a tremendous amount of control, and it's not going to happen without these eitzot that we're eventually going to get into in the next number of shirim B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, what are you saying, Ari?
No, Rabbi Nachman actually frowned even drinking water before shacharit.
Yeah. And you can see, look, what is halakha. I don't want to get into because I really want to get into what we want to talk about today, but what is halacha? We had the discussion maybe before we were doing the Zoom meetings, I don't remember. But anyway, halacha is almost always the least common denominator, or the bottom level that's okay, fine, that's permissible, or that'll get you through, that'll squeak you by. Chassidut is always about, don't tell me, yes, I need to know what the bottom line is. but I'm really much more interested in soaring above that. And so even though it is mutar to drink water before you daven if there's a need, and it's mutar to drink black coffee if you look at the actual Mishnah Berurah carefully, just as black coffee. It's mutar to do that if you need it to get you going and to be able to daven properly. It's mutar. But like you just said, Rabbi Nachman says yes, but it's actually even much better to rise to the level where you have nothing. You don't drink anything, not even water. That's the higher level. That's the higher standard. So for sure. Okay, and then the last one, which is Keneged depression. That's an obvious one, which obviously is going to be simcha, being happy. Let's see what R Chaim Vital writes in Sha'arei Kedushah. He says the following: simcha ha tadirit b'chelkot. Always be happy with your portion, with your lot in life. Ki chol da'avdin min shemaya l'tav. Because everything that heaven does is for good, and that's again not easy. We're going to focus on that in this next in a little while because this is what really this whole lesson is going to be about. And Likutei Moharan Dalet is realizing that even those things that don't seem like they're good, they really are good because that's all that Shemayim can do. It's like Shemayim can only do good, and that's like written in the contract. And so anything that happens to us or around us that surrounds us must be good, even if it doesn't appear that. And so therefore, we have to be happy with that, because if we're not happy, what's the matter? What do you mean why aren't you happy? Hashem just did you something good. Why aren't you happy? You should be jumping and dancing and singing and hopping all over the place. Hashem does good to you all the time, like this song that's just taking over the whole country, right? You see, everybody's singing this song. It's being sung in shuls and shuls and shuls and sung in concerts all over the place. Everybody's singing that song. Why? Because people know they got to get out of this sense of depression. They want to teach themselves that everything Hashem does is good, and just keeps getting better and better and better. Let's go on with what he says. V'gam lezarez atzmo b'tachlit hasimcha, and you have to kind of urge yourself on, encourage yourself, right? In simcha. In what kind of simcha? Simcha ba'avodat kono. When you're serving Hashem, your creator, you have to be happy at doing that. And then he brings down a couple of sources to support that. One is from Tehillim, chapter 119, and one is from Pirkei Avos. Let's read what it says. Sas anochi al imratecha kamo shalal rab. I'm going to be happy and rejoice regarding your word, Hashem, like somebody who basically has found a whole lot of like booty, I don't know, a whole lot of plunder. He's found this treasure, like a lot of treasure. Wow! And he's all excited. He's got this big pirate treasure that he found swept up on the beach, and he opened up. There's all kinds of gold and jewels and precious metals and pearls and all this stuff in there. But you're going to be pretty happy if something like that happened to you. So that's what David Melech says. You got to be happy like all the time. And what to say there in Pirkei Avos, it says, "Aseh Toratacha keva umalachtecha arai." You should make your Torah learning fixed and make your work not fixed. It's whatever happens, happens. Occasional, not the other way around. If you do that, you'll end up being able to develop this meter of being happy in your portion. And now looking at the other people, what those other people have, so on and so on and so on. All right. So now hopefully you've got your chart from last week all nicely filled out. Stick it out in the fridge or in your bedroom by your desk, somewhere that you can see it on a regular basis, and remind yourself of it. Remind yourself and maybe pick different aspects of it in a certain day that you're going to try to work on and you're going to try to focus on. Because really all those bad character traits, all they do is make our lives bitter and unhappy. And really, each of these different negative traits feeds off the other ones, by the way. For example, if you're arrogant and you're angry, you're not going to be happy, right? So that's going to lead to depression. So all of these things are going to fertilize, and they're going to feed off each other. And so the easier you break one, the easier it's going to be to break other ones, because they're all interrelated. Okay. So before we go further now, which is our new lesson for the day, Any comments or questions on that whole concept of the four fundamental building blocks of creation and the four negative midot and the four positive midot? Any final clarifications or questions from anybody? Okay. All right. So now this discussion we started last week on this topic is found in Likutei Moharan 4, a Torah Dalet. And yet it's like way later in that Torah. I forget where it is exactly. Right, it's in Sif 8. So there's like 7 Sifim that come before that. And as we were going through it, I thought, well, you know what? It's probably pretty important to actually go through the whole thing, but we can't go through the whole thing. It would just take too many weeks. But yet, the major Eitzah that Rabbi Nachman said that we read last week at the very beginning was to say vidui in front of a Talmid Chacham. That's going to be the way we're going to be able to help fix all these problems. If you go back to your notes from last week, you'll see that in the very first paragraph. He says vidui devarim. That's what he says, and he says Talmid Chacham yifaresh v'morer lo derech lefi shorish nishmato. That this Talmid Chacham of the generation, we'll call him the tzaddik of the generation, he's going to be able to kind of help guide you according to the root of your soul. So this is a very bizarre thing. It almost sounds like Catholic or something. Like, what do you mean? You're going to go do confession before a person? It doesn't seem Jewish, and yet it is Jewish. But it has become it's been sidelined. Is that the right word? Been sidelined. It's very interesting. A lot of things that the Christians picked up from Judaism and from the Torah, once it became popularized in these other religions, there was a tendency within Judaism to push back on it because they didn't want to become somewhat associated with the same thing now that was being popularized with another religion. This happened in other areas as well. Like, for example, another good example is meditation. Meditation was very common in the old days, especially when the temple was standing. And meditation was an important aspect of receiving nevuah. And yet also meditation slowly began to emerge in the East as a major aspect of sort of Eastern mystical religions. And they began to popularize it. And when that happened, as a result, it became somewhat sidelined within mainstream Judaism. And this is also happening with respect to vidui in front of a Talmid Chacham, because what happened? The Christians decided they were going to set up a guy called a priest, and everyone was going to go to this priest, and they were going to tell him all their bad stuff, confess, and then this priest was going to give them certain things to do, so certain prayers, and that was easy. So it's like, where did they get that idea from? Where did these Christians get this idea from? Quite frankly, they got it from us. But as soon as they began to popularize it, we tend to say, oh, that's not in the Torah. So this happened. It happened a number of times. I'm not going to go through different examples, but just enough to illustrate the point. So because it's such a strange idea that we hear today that you need to do vidui before a person, that sounds pretty bizarre. Doesn't sound Jewish. Therefore, I thought we probably need to go through this teaching much more in depth and much more carefully, because you just can't say that. You just can't say you got to do vidui devarim before Talmid Chacham, and all of a sudden you're going to have all this great help. It's like, what? Where are you coming from? So we need to see how Rabbi Nachman derives it, how he arrives at that conclusion, where his source material is from, and kind of like step by step by step. I'm not going to go, at least my plan is not to go through every last word of Rabbi Nachman, but to try to pull out a lot of the major arguments, which really come from the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, but there's other source material as well. And then eventually, hopefully, we'll see this picture emerging from the Torah that, yeah, in fact, this is a Torah principle. So we're going to have to do that for a while before we get to the actual, eitzah of how we actually help ourselves. So with that as a bit of an introduction, I apologize, it took a little bit of time to get to where we need to go today, but now we're going to start with what we're really calling workshop number 24. So we're going to begin here with the very beginning of Likutei Moharan Dalet and Sif Aleph. The very, very beginning. If you open up your own volume of Likutei Moharan, you go to the very beginning of Torah Dalet, this is what you'll see. So I'm calling this, what is the goal? What's the goal? And I think Rabbi Nachman is answering this question, what is our goal? in Sif Aleph. Then in Sif Bet, which is the next paragraph, he's answering another question, which is, how do we achieve that goal? And in the third Sif, he's answering another question, which we don't even understand yet, which is, how do we raise up Malchut, which we'll have to explain as we get there. Hopefully we'll do it today. If not, we'll do it next week. But I think it's important to ask questions, because if we just read stuff, boom, and we don't really see, why is Rabbi Nachman saying this? Almost always he's answering a question, but he doesn't always spell out the question. He expects you to understand the question that he's answering. Rashi does the same thing, by the way. The more you read Rashi, the more you realize that Rashi comments are almost always in answer to an unspoken question. I said, why is Rashi saying that? And you think, oh, because you could add this question, now he's answering that. Well, this is what Rabbi Nachman does. So it's my understanding that the very first part of Likutei Moharan 4 is actually answering a question. The question is, what is our goal in life? Let's see what he says. When a person knows, I mean, not just is aware that he's supposed to know, but when he really knows that all the events that happen to him, all the events of his life, they're for his good. Zot b'china hi me'ein olam haba. This is the aspect of sort of like you're in olam haba. Now that's the goal. He says right there, the goal of our life is to know, like to really know, not just have emunah, but to know it. And there's a big difference between emunah and knowing. Normally we think of emunah when you don't really understand what's going on and you don't know what's happening, but you believe it must be good. He doesn't say here that you have to have emunah, that everything happens is for your good. He says you have to know it. Now, to illustrate the difference between knowing and having faith, when things are dark and you can't see well, you need emunah. Because you may know in your head that a certain building is down the road, but you can't see it. So you have faith that it's there. Somebody didn't take it, it didn't get blown up. It's not gone, it's still there. But when the sun shines, you can see it. You don't need emunah when the sun shines. And that's why at nighttime, after the Shema, we say, what do we say? We say, Emet ve'emunah kol zot, right? Because that's nighttime. You need emunah during nighttime. But in the daytime, we don't say emunah. After the Shema, what do we say? We say emet v'yatziv. Like, true and correct. So we see again that emunah is necessary at nighttime, and yediyah, or knowing, is really a daytime phenomenon. And he's saying here that this is something you have to actually know it, which is much more clear than just emunah. All right. So I think many of us have probably heard this before. Everything happens to you is for good. Yeah. But when it really happens to you, it doesn't look for good. Do you really? And how do you know that you've come to the level of yediyah? I'm going to suggest the following. You know that you have come to the level of knowing when you have no negative reaction in your heart, or nor in your actions, nor in your words, or in your thoughts. If you have some kind of negative reaction to what's happening, that it's not good, it's sort of bad, and it's, then you don't know yet. You haven't arrived at that level yet. It's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. But it's a way for you to assess where you actually arrived there or not. So I think many of us are probably at the level where we know that things, we know. We use the word in different ways. Where I am aware that the Torah teaches me that everything that happens is for my good. I am aware of that fact. Whether I know it on an ongoing, minute by minute, second by second basis, where I never have the wrong reaction to something that doesn't appear to be good, that's a whole separate level. But that's the level we have to get to, and that's why he says that's an aspect of olam haba. Because in olam haba, everything is clear. Olam haba, it's all truth. There's no wondering about this and about that. It's clear. The light is inside your head. And you're basking in the light of the Shechinah. Everything is obvious. That's why he says it's an aspect of olam haba. Let's go on. Kamosh Gatu. We have a passage he brings down in Tehillim. This is a very important pasuk, and is brought down a lot by Rabbi Nachman to illustrate a very important point, which we'll try to explain. B'Hashem ahalel davar, be'Elokim ahalel davar. So what does it mean? First of all, let's translate it. I will praise Yud K Vav K about something that happens, and I will also praise Elokim when something that happens. What's the difference? Very important point. Now we're gonna get down to very, very important sort of point that's yesodic in all this topic. The name Yud K Vav K is a name that is associated normally we think associated with mercy, is associated with chesed, is associated with open revelation of good. And it's not a name associated with din. The name Elokim is a name associated with din. It's a name associated with harshness, with strictness, with, quote, things that don't appear to be good. Whereas the name Yud K Vav K is a name that is associated with things that we obviously see as being good. So what he's saying, what David Melch is saying here is that I will praise Hashem, meaning Yud K Vav K, I will praise Hashem. Hashem is Yud K Vav K. I will praise that aspect of the Ribono Shel Olam when everything is great. That's easy to do. Normally, right? You get a raise, or I don't know, you find your shidduch, or you're under the chuppah, you have a bris on a baby boy. That's that. Bashem Ahalil Devar. Something happened, some Devar took place, and I'm going to praise and I'm going to thank Hashem for that. Wonderful. There's no big mila, or maybe to some it is, just even to thank Hashem. Okay, great. But the really difficulty is the next one. Be'Elokim Ahalil Devar. When things don't go good, and when there's judgment, and when there's din in our life, and things don't appear to be good, like this war that's been going on for whatever it is now, over a year and almost a half. That's Elokim. It's still from the Ribono Shel Olam, and it's still good, but it doesn't look good. And so what does David Melch say? He says, I'm still gonna praise Hashem and thank Hashem for those devarim, for those things that take place that are coming and emanating from the name of Elokim. This is what he's saying. This is what this pasuk means. And this is why Rabbi Nachman brings it down here. So there's two aspects of the Ribono Shel Olam that we're going to see through this whole thing. One is Hashem, Yud K Vav K, and the other one is Elokim. Now Yud K, just if you want to know, Yud K Vav K is associated with the spheros called Zir Anpin. I know it's Chesed, Gevur, Tiferet, Netzach, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. And the name Elokim is associated with Malchut down below. So from these different sets of sphirot emanate different aspects of the way Hashem governs the world. All right, let's go on. So he's saying that same point again, that when we learn to praise Hashem and to thank Hashem for things that look great and are wonderful and filled with obvious chesed, and also for things that don't look great, that seem to be filled with tremendous amount of din, and we can thank Hashem for both. That's an aspect of Olam Haba. Kamosh Amru Chachamenu Zichron Livracha, like it says in Mesech Pesachim Nun Amud Aleph, Daf Nun Amud Aleph. What does it say there? It says, Bayom Aho Yiyeh Hashem Echad U'Shemo Echad. That's the famous pasuk. We know that pasuk. I think that's in Zechariah, if I remember correctly. In the future, right? What does it say? In the future, when Hashem reveals himself openly, it'll say, Bayom Aho Yiyeh Hashem Echad U'Shemo Echad. What do you mean, Hashem Echad U'Shemo Echad? The Gemara asks the question. V'yikshu, it asks, V'chi ha'idna lavhu echad. You mean to tell me now Hashem is not one? The Ribono Shel Olam is not one? And the answer is, what's their answer? Ha'idna mevarachin al hatov. Sorry, al hatova. Now, when something, quote, good happens to us, we make a bracha. What bracha do we make? Hatov v'hametiv. Hashem is good and he does good. Va'al hara, and on something that's not good, that's bad, or that seems bad, we make a different bracha. We make the bracha Dayan Emet, that Hashem is the true judge. And if you look up the halacha on this, you find out something rather remarkable. The halacha says that you're supposed to make both brachas with the same amount of simcha. It's not that you make dayan emet with some kind of remorse. You're supposed to say that just as happy, just as much happiness as you say, atov v'metiv. But just that halakhically speaking, you actually have to technically say two different brachas. Why? Because right now we are living in a world where there is a separation. There is peirud between Elokim and Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. This is the fundamental problem in our world today, that there is this separation. If you look at almost all of the, like Nusach Sfard, Sidurim, and sources, you always find that one of the most important things, one of the main kavanas in tefillah, for example, or anytime you do a mitzvah, is always what? Is always to bring together, to have yichud between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shechinah. What does that mean? That's what this means. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Shechinah is Elokim, is Malchut, and you want them to be together, to be one, not to be separate, not to have this peirud. Peirud means that now we have this artificiality thing called good. When things go well, we like that, and as a result, we have to make a bracha specifically for that. And then when things don't go good, look things like are bad, we make a different kind of bracha. There we say dayan emet. But you see, that's not the ideal. The ideal is that, but yet we're still supposed to say them both with happiness, which is like, whoa, why? How can we possibly say both with happiness? Because of what Rabbi Nachman said in the very first thing. When we reach the level that we really absolutely know with complete, like total yediyah shlemus, what do we know? That everything, kol ma'orotav haim l'tovato. When we arrive at that level, that no matter what happens to whether it looks good or whether it doesn't look good, it certainly is for our good, and we really feel it, then of course we're going to say dayan emet with simcha. If we cannot say dayan emet with simcha, then we haven't arrived at that level. That's just the way it is. That's a way to self-evaluate ourselves. And it's okay. It's a very difficult issue. I'll read that note later because it's too long. Hang on a second. No, it's not too long. I mean, it's too long for me to pay attention to it. That's what I mean. Now let's go on. And in the future, kulo, everything, whether it's good or appears to be bad, kulo, all events, we will say only one bracha. That's only the bracha that we'll say in the future. Now, you may say, well, I'm at that level where I absolutely feel and believe and know that everything that happens is for the good. So why do I have to say dayan emet? Because you live in a world today where that's the halacha today. So you can't just make up your own halacha and say, I'm not going to say dayan emet anymore, even if you know that it's good, even if you feel that it's good, if you have no problems whatsoever in your head that could possibly be bad, it doesn't matter. The halacha today is you have to say dayan emet with simcha. Only in the future are you going to be able to not say dayan emet with simcha. Yes? That's right. So seriously, someone who would say hatov, v'meitiv, jumping and clapping is really supposed to make the other bracha the same way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now you have to be respectful, obviously. Maybe I don't know. Maybe yes. Maybe no. Maybe you feel it in your heart, but you don't jump up and down. Let's say when your loved one dies. I'm not so sure you want to jump up and down. But there should still be a recognition in your heart that what happened is absolute best. It's just as good, if not better, than when Hashem gave me $1,000 a month raise. Like how you manifest that physically, I don't want to go that far, but maybe you're right. But that's just like, I don't know. Okay. So the main point I want us to see here is that even when, quote, bad things happen, they happen for reasons. There's three major reasons which I came up with that I think can help us why bad things happen. Again, I always have put that in quotation marks. Number one, it can be for kapara, and that's a very good thing, right? So that we don't have to experience Gehenna in that way. We get kapara now, we get cleansed now, and we're took care of it now. I don't want to deal with Gehenna. I'd rather not go into Gehenna. So kapara is a good thing that is the result of sometimes things that don't seem good. Another is that it can trigger somebody to a higher level of tshuva, which is also good. And number three, when quote bad things happen, it can also help people to grow in ways that they would never have grown had they not gone through those difficult quote bad experiences. So there's at least three major reasons. But sometimes when you're going through that bad thing, you don't have any clue whatsoever why you're going through it. And it's very difficult to all of a sudden reach up to some great level and just like be really happy in your heart and in your mind. It's not simple at all. But Rabbi Nachman says it is achievable, otherwise he wouldn't write it here. And we're going to learn how we can go about actually achieving that, which again is going to come down to this concept of vidui devarim lifnei Talmud Chacham. But that's going to have to wait because we have to kind of set the whole stage here. So the main takeaway so far is, number one, there's two aspects of the Ribono Shel Olam we're focusing on. One is the name Hashem, and the other one is the name Elokim. And they really are two like almost opposite aspects, and they are opposite and they are different today in our world. They're not together, but the more that we learn to bring them together, the more we will find in our own mind that we can take both kinds of events and we see that they are good. When they stay separate, when there's this perud in our own mind and in our own world, and these two aspects of the Ribono Shel Olam are really separate, then yeah, we're really going to experience, and it's going to be very difficult to feel and to know and to think that no matter what happens is always good. The way to achieve it is we have to bring these two things together. And that's exactly what the next part of this teaching in Likutei Moharan says, which is how do we actually achieve the goal? We just said that we have to get to that point. Great, but I'm not at that point. So what do I do? What do I do? Okay, here I didn't quote you the whole bit because there's some side issues that I didn't want to get into. I want to try to stay as focused as possible. So let's see what Rabbi Nachman says. V'zot habechina I efshar l'hasig ele kishema'ale bechinat Malchut Kedushah me hagalut mi bein ha'akum. So that's a bit of a mouthful there. But what is he saying is this recognition, this knowing that everything that happens to us is for our good, is impossible to achieve. What he says, it's impossible to achieve, except we are able to raise up Malchut that's been sucked down and trapped amongst the goyim because of galut. And what is Malchut? It means the Shechinah. Because when we went into Galus, the Shechinah went into Galus. Where did she go? She went in amongst the Goyim. And the Goyim are literally sucking off of the Shechinah. It's like, that's what the Shechinah is. She's like a mother, right? And you might want to think of the Shechinah as having breasts that nourish, right? Klal Yisrael. Now all of a sudden what happens is the Shechinah got sucked down and got pulled down amongst the Goyim. So what are they doing? They're sucking off and they're nourishing off the Shechinah. That's why they're going to have all this power and all this control in the world today. And why they have power to oppress us and so forth and so on, because the Shechinah is in exile. And what he's saying here is that the only way we're going to be able to rescue this problem and think the right way and know that all of the events that happen to us are really for our good, the only way that's going to happen is if we are able to rescue the Shechinah, which he says here, he calls it Malchut. That's the sphere of Malchut, which we've learned many times before. Shechinah is the sphere of Malchut. When we're able to rescue her out from being among the Goyim and put her where she's supposed to be. Where is she supposed to be? She's supposed to be with her husband. Who's that? That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Yud Kei Vav Kei. You see, that's the Perud. They're supposed to be together, husband and wife, Kilu, right? The name Hashem and the name Elokim are supposed to be together in Yichud, husband and wife having intimate relations. But you see what happened? The Shechinah got pulled away. There's Perud, and she's not with her husband, and she's over here. She's been abducted like Dinah. She's been abducted by Shechem. And so as a result, there's all this Perud in the world. What do you mean good and bad? There's clearly good and bad. What are you talking about, Hashea? You want to tell me that everything is good? Were you a nutcase? Because why? Because we can't see it, because the Shechinah is in exile. So we have to get the Shechinah back and put her back together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what he says. Let's go on. Ki akshav hamalchut v'memshala la'akum. The sphere of Malchut, government, governance, sovereignty, kingship, whatever word you want to put onto it, of the Jewish people, where it should be, is basically captive by the goyim. And this is the exact same reason why we see all of our brothers and sisters still abducted in Gaza. It's all a manifestation of the same thing. Ki yonakim b'bichinat malchut. They're like nourishing. They're yonik. They're drawing their nourishment like a baby nursing off of a mother. That's what the goyim are doing with respect to Malchut, because they've stolen her kilo and put her in their control, and we're responsible for that. That's why we need to get up in the middle of the night, by the way, for Chatzot, and cry over this, because we have done this to ourselves. But you see, well, we're not interested in this. I got other things that are more important. And so things go on, and they're not fixed still. All right, well, that's a separate topic. I don't want to get into there. But I think Rabbi Nachman wants us to realize that everybody's at their own level, whatever level we're at, whatever level each an individual one of us are at, doesn't matter. Whatever level we're at, each of us according to our level and according to our ability. We have to work at helping the Shechinah come out of exile. Okay, so now we've answered two questions. What is the goal? To see that everything is good, no matter what, both whether it emanates from Hashem or whether it emanates from Elohim. See, all of it is good, and to thank and praise Hashem, that's the goal. How do we do that? We can't do that unless we bring the Shechinah out of exile. Okay, now, next part is, how do we raise up the Shechinah? That's what that question is. How do we raise up Malchut? How do we get her out of being a hostage, kilu, by the goyim? See, I don't want to dwell on the whole war thing, but I mean, it's obviously on everybody's mind, especially this thing drags on. We have to realize that the things that happen in our world today are only manifestations of the deeper spiritual things that are happening in our world today, in the upper worlds and in the lower worlds. The physical things that are happening are just a physical manifestation of the spiritual thing that's happening. That if we could see that, if we could understand that, we would be like 1,000% better off trying to solve the problem than by the ridiculous mechanisms that we try to put into solving the problems today, which, you know what, it's not solving anything. Okay, now let's go to Sif Gimel, which is the third section, and maybe we'll finish this if we can. Now he says, okay, so it's impossible. La Shiva Malchut, La Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's impossible. See how he does it? He starts here and he says, you can't do this unless you do this. And so, by the way, you can't do this unless you do this. So he's giving us, I told you this before when we started to learn about Rabbi Nachman, how he gives us a step-by-step, approach to things. Once we understand the problem, he gives us, do this, this will lead to this, this will lead to this, this will lead to this. And, I'm not saying this in a critical, negative way, but when I began to be introduced to Breslov teachings many years ago, everybody talking about be happy, have emunah, sing and dance, very nice, but I'm not happy. And I don't feel like I want to sing and dance. And I don't have a whole lot of mood. So don't tell me just go ahead and have a emunah and be happy and sing and dance. And so on one hand I felt Rabbi Nachman's teachings were very appealing, and then on the other hand I felt they're very frustrating because they seemed so superficial. And it wasn't until I actually started to read Likutei Moharan myself and actually read what he said that I realized, yes, he's actually giving us all the steps we need, but they're not the popularized sayings out there. The popularized sayings are always, be happy, sing and dance, get on top of a van and jump around and sing songs. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people that can't get on top of the van and sing songs because they're just too depressed to do that in the first place. So you have to teach them how to get undepressed. And Rabbi Nachman literally will give you those steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you know you're supposed to have emunah, but you don't, and you know you don't, he'll give you steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and he'll help you to develop that. That's what needs to be taught. That's my opinion. That's what needs to be taught. More popularizing the message instead of just to be happy and just it's nice just to be happy, but if you're not there, you're not there. All right, so let's see what he said. Now this is what we're going to spend the next couple classes on. What? Rabbeinu, what do you mean that I cannot raise the Shechinah out of Galus? I cannot return her to her place with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, except by doing vidui? in front of a Talmid Chacham, and that's the whole rest of literally Likutei Moharan 4. The whole lesson is all trying to explain to the reader why that's the key. And B'ezrat Hashem, we'll go through it little bit by little bit. But at least let's finish this section. The main first of all, you should be asking yourself the question, well, why? What's so special about a Talmid Chacham? And it's not just any Talmid Chacham. When Rabbi Nachman means this, he means the Talmid Chacham, the most chashuv Talmid Chacham in the generation, like the Ramchal talks about in Derech Hashem. Why? Because such a person is able to atone in the aspect of Moshe Rabbeinu. He's able to atone for the sins of the people. That's why. And that's what B'ezrat Hashem we'll get to. But anyway, let's just finish this. It's getting close to the top of the hour. By doing vidui devarim lifnei the Talmid Chacham, what happens? We're able to fix and raise up the aspect of Malchut to her place, to her root. Where is her root? Her root is with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where her root is. V'zeh perush, and this is the explanation of this pasuk from Hosea, which says, "Kachu imachem devarim," take with you words. That's part of the pasuk, and Rabbi Nachman interjects and he says, "V'zeh vidui devarim." This means doing vidui. Zeh b'chinat malchut, and devarim is an aspect of malchut. Words are malchut, because a king cannot be a king unless he basically speaks, right? Malchut peh is the famous statement in Petach Eliyahu in the Zohar. It's also in many Sidurim, and at least within Nusach Safard and others, they say this on a regular basis. Malchut peh. The sphere of Malchut is all about peh. It's all about words. That's what he's saying here. He's saying the same thing. When it says vidui devarim, or the pasuk says kechu imachem devarim, he's just letting us know. By the way, devarim is an aspect of Malchut. It says kamod dabar echad ledor. Now that's a reference in Sanhedrin. It's an aspect of Yeshua and Moshe Rabbeinu, that there was no way that Hashem was going to allow Moshe Rabbeinu's life to continue even one thread into the time allotted for Yeshua to rule, because that's the point here. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says this word dabar. Dabar means a manhig, a leader, a ruler, and it's going to be one ruler at a time. You can't have two rulers. So there was no way that Hashem was going to allow Moshe Rabbeinu and Yeshua to overlap, because then in that overlap you would have two leaders, and so they had to be side by side. As soon as Moshe Rabbeinu was niftar, then at the very moment Yeshua became the manhig. That's what the statement in Sanhedrin says. Kamo dabar echad ledor. Only one manhig per generation. Dabar lashon manhig umoshel. That's also a Rashi that tells us that the word dabar means a leader and a ruler. And then the rest of the pasuk says, "Vishu el Hashem." You bring those words, those devarim, right, to somebody who is the dabar of the generation, and that's how you do tshuva to Hashem. Sheyetakenu v'ya'alu et hadarim. That's how you fix up and raise up all the devarim. Et bichanat malchut. By the way, devarim also means not just right. It doesn't mean just words. It means things, and that's exactly where we started from in the very beginning. But when all these things happen to us, that's the pasuk in Tehillim 56. What did it say? Vashem ahalel davar, right? And Be'elokim ahalel davar. It's the same aspect. Davar means word. It means things. It means malchut. It's all these ideas are all tied together. And malchut is the aspect of Elokim. That's what it says. Oh, I forgot to change that word Elo. I left it with the A. Sorry about that. That means you can't just chuck this piece of paper. You have to put it in a Geniza. Sorry. El Hashem. And El Hashem is also possible. So you have to be able to return, right, the aspect of malchut to Hashem. That's what this pasuk is saying. Hainu, like we saw above. Bashem ahalel davar, be'elokim ahalel davar. I also forgot to do it there as well. Sorry. Hainu sheyeda shetkol morotav kulo l'tova l'tovato. He's just telling you what I just finished telling you. He's tying it right back to where we started from. That by doing vidui devarim with words in front of the person who is the dabar of the generation, that's how you do tshuva, and that's how you return malchut to its source, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's how we come to recognize that everything really is good. And we'll have to flesh that out as time goes by. But then he finishes up and he says, by et kol hadarim hatov hamitiv. And eventually we reach the point where we won't never say Dayan Emet ever again, because the reality will be in front of us, and the halakha will change. But the halakha is not at that level now because we still have the Shechinah in Galut. Okay, so I'm about 1 minute off. Sorry, let me just take a look here. So the Shechinah is the princess that we are to rescue. Yes. There's different ways that we can refer to the Shechinah. Sometimes she's called the queen, sometimes she's called the princess, but yeah. Okay, anything else anybody wants to ask before we wrap it up? Actually, what I'll do, I think I'll stop the camera, and then if anybody wants to say anything, they can. So to next week, all be good. Take care of yourselves.